clear what they're going to do and run on something. I've run on, as you know, I believe in plans. I've run on something every time I've run. I'm running for re-election in 24, and I've been traveling the state, and I'm telling people this is exactly what I'm going to do, and that's why I win, and that's what whoever's going to run on the Republican side, they ought to be very clear. You vote for me, this is what you get. You vote for the Democrat, that's what you get. And what the Democrats are doing is bad for this country.
Now, Rick Scott, I followed you for a long time, and you're two very close campaigns for governor, and you'll win re-election in Florida easily. But you always have run on a plan, but you also have a bankroll. You made a lot of money because you worked very hard. You started out in public housing, and you made money. Does someone who runs for the Senate have to begin with a bankroll?
No, but what you have to do is you have to convince donors that you can win. I mean, I tell people, people come to me all the time, they want to run. And I said, well, here, you've got to build relationships with sort of all these groups. 1, voters. 2, donors. 3, volunteers, because you need all 3 of them. If you can't get a group of volunteers to help you, it's hard to win. If you can't get donors to help you, it's hard to win. But if you have look at Tiffany Smiley. Tiffany Smiley outraised for her campaign Patty Murray. So you can, if you want to, you don't have to have money to win, but what you have to do is you have to convince donors of why you can win, and you've got a great agenda. You got to do both. You have to have an agenda, and you have to tell people, this is why I can win.
No, I also, you know this because you were all over the place. Indiana's an open seat. I want Jim Banks to run for that because I think he'll win. He's young. I don't want 77-year-old Mitch Daniels to get into that. I love Mitch Daniels. I think he's great. But I think the ideal candidate will be a veteran who's under 50 who can connect with donors, volunteers, and voters. Am I right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It makes all the sense in the world. Because we need to have new energy. And by the way, Jim Banks is great. I've had the opportunity to work with Jim quite a bit, and he is great. And he clearly is a conservative. He has principles. He's got a wonderful wife. He'd be a great candidate.
And he's a Navy man. He deployed to Iraq, to Afghanistan. And I just hope the field clears because I don't want to have messy primaries. Now, you had a rule, and I don't know if the NRC is going to change that rule. I haven't talked to Senator Daines yet about not intervening in primaries. I want them to. I want them to tell the voters of whatever state it is, not make them do something, but give them their professional opinion on who would be the best candidate. And recruitment is hard if you can't back it up. Do you think the NRC ought to change its rules and go and endorse someone?
Here's what's hard, Hugh. You can become the establishment candidate then. You become the DC candidate.
Yep, I know.
And that makes it hard. Where you can have an impact, which we did not have the opportunity this time because the Democrats didn't really have primaries, and they will this time, is you can participate. It's easier to participate in the Democrat primaries than it is, as Republicans. It's what they did to us. I mean, Democrats participated in our primaries. Now, it didn't help them out in Colorado. They spent, I think, $10 million against Joe O'Dane. It didn't work. So I think that you got to be really, really cautious because there's so many examples of DC establishment Republicans get involved in primaries, and then that person loses, and then you have no relationship with the person that got through the primary. So
let's take Jim Banks, for example. Jim is solidly right-wing, solidly conservative, veteran, a chair of the Republican Study Committee. There are some people who will want to challenge him for a little notoriety, get a leg up in the future. If I'm the NRSC, I say to him, don't do that or we will not be on your side in the general. That's putting a very light finger on it. That's not anointing Jim Banks. It's just telling that the nonsense candidates do not screw up your life here.
But what happens if Jim loses? Are they really going to stay out of that race when they can pick it up?
No, they would get in, but I don't think he's going to lose. I mean, I think this is the kind of thing that it's so obvious he's going to win. All it does is hurt him if people get in against him at this point.
Remember, there's lots of examples. Like, remember the NRSC endorsed Charlie Crist against Marco Rubio.
Good point. But that was the old. That was, you had good consultants, you had good pollsters. I mean, you were a happy talker, like I'm a happy talker towards the end, and we got beat in some places where we kind of knew we were going to get beat, but we were doing a happy talk because we were praying. I just want realism, Senator, and you just came through this. Yeah. And how much realism do we need in the party about who can win and who can't?
Oh, but we can do that by individual senators can endorse. Donors, donors can figure this stuff out too. I mean, I think there's probably Hugh, I think it's hard to do for Republicans, the DC establishment Republicans that have an impact on the Republican side, but I think they can help make sure, it's what Schumer does on our side, helps try to pick, our candidates. We probably can have an impact on their side.
Oh, I'd love to get them to nominate a lunatic to run against you, but you're going to win easily. I just don't want any Republicans to try and run to your right, annoy you, lose by 80 points, but make you spend money. Really, I will come down like a ton of bricks on people. I will play in the Rick Scott primary to keep people out. Is anyone even thinking about running against you?
No.
Good.
I mean, look, it's everybody can run. Everybody gets the right to run. But I've been traveling. I travel the state. I've shaken hands with at least 600,000 Floridians. I mean, I travel the state. I was in 2 cities, 3 cities yesterday. I'll be in a couple cities today. And when we're on recess, I'm traveling the state. So I'm talking to people. I think if you do that stuff and you've done your job and you did what you said you're going to do, I think it's hard to run against you, a person. And so
Jim Lankford drew an opponent. I just couldn't believe it. He's like you, as conservative as the day is long. And I early on got in and said, that's nuts. Let me close by asking you, the RNC is meeting in Southern California in a couple of weeks. They're going to announce when the debates start for the presidency. When do you want them to start? I want them to start in May. They're talking about July or August in Milwaukee. When do you want them to start?
I think May. I think May would be early. Don't you think there won't be everybody that's, I know there's lots of people going to get in. I don't think everybody will be in the race by then.
The reason I want to start in May is that it gets us small donors to the RNC and win red, and we're behind Democrats.
Yeah, it probably helps. Yeah, you're right.
It's just audience. I just want audience they're all going to be good candidates. I'm not picking anyone. I just want audience. Senator Rick Scott, keep coming back. He's running for re-election. He's going to win. And if you're even thinking about running a protest campaign, go do something that will make good use of your time. Thank you, Senator Scott. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Voice is starting to come back, as it always does. I think the weather just does that to me. I'm so glad that I didn't get laryngitis. It just sort of, whenever these huge rainstorms sweep into California, it always happens. Anyway, welcome. The 200 versus the 20, part 4 today. Washington Post reports overnight that a number of the 20 are ready to come over. They've made a deal with Team McCarthy, and that means the ice will break. And the question is, who stays on the 20? Who's left? And they might as well tattoo Gates on their forehead. If they're knuckleheads and they stay over there after the deal is cut to increase. I don't know what it is that they got. Chip Roy will bring over a bunch of people. And that's the opportunity to cross the bridge. And it's all going to happen at once. And then we'll know who the real holdarts are. And then they're not the Spartans. They're the dummies. All right. Chip Roy is smart. Chip Roy is principled. Chip Roy wanted some stuff. He apparently got some stuff. I don't know what's in the deal. But when he comes over, other people will come with him. And they might salvage their reputations. I don't know how Sparts does, because that you stand in the middle of the road and you get run over, and just knuckleheaded move. But we'll see. People come over and vote for McCarthy on the ballot where Roy votes for McCarthy. That's the moment that we're waiting for. Meanwhile, Trey Gowdy said this on Hannity last night, cut number 9.
We're going to have to. I mean, unless you believe in minority rights in the extreme, you don't go from 20 to 218. I mean, you're never going to get some of these people, Sean. I mean, they live to be in opposition to Republicans. But people watching your show need to call and say, you know what? I didn't work my tail off in November to watch y'all look like a clown show on national television. So y'all get behind Kevin. You got your motion to vacate. As it relates to President Trump, they love him when they need a pardon. They love him when they need attention. But when he says Kevin's my person, all of a sudden they know better. I mean, they know better than the Republican conference. Kevin got 85% of the vote in the primary, and yet they know better. I can't think of anything more anti-democratic than 15% trying to dictate to the other 85% who the speaker should be.
Now, you know what when Trey Gowdy mentions the pardon, he's talking about Matt Gaetz and the Gaetz gang. And Matt Gaetz, I tweeted it out. If you go to Hugh Hewitt on Twitter, you'll see it. I tweeted out, one of my buddies sent me the Gaetz fundraising text with his picture. And Gaetz is going to be the Typhoid Mary of D.C. Seriously, people don't want to sit next to him on the podium in committee hearings. And it's going to get worse because of this stunt. After Chip Roy brings over the response. I've always thought Chip Roy was sort of like when the Republican votes with the Democrats in the Senate in order to be able to bring back the motion to reconsider. I always thought that Chip Roy went over there to get a couple more deals done and to make sure he knew what was going on in the opposition. Matt Rosendale, who wanted to be senator in Montana, has badly damaged that prospect. But he started to sound last night on the House floor like maybe he realizes that. Maybe there's a deal there. Matt Rosendale, cut number 6.
We have had more discussion and debate over the last 3 days than I have participated in on this floor for the last 2 years. And it's healthy. It absolutely promotes the collegiality that everyone is striving to obtain. We're having discussions not just within our own party, but amongst each other as we walk around and start planning for the legislation that we will need to address over the next 2 years in the 118th Congress, that sooner or later, yes, sooner or later, we will begin to function as.
You know, I think Matt Rosendale thinks that helps him. It doesn't. You ought to be quiet and out of the way and off stage. You haven't seen Chip Roy on the floor making a speech like that. He talks occasionally. Yesterday, the guy from PA, Scott Perry, almost missed his vote because he was doing a hit for Fox. All these guys, there are two kinds. Those who have ambitions to move up into the Senate, those who want to gavel in the House, And those are the people with political ambitions. And then there are the people who have media ambitions. And they think they're going to get a gig. Lauren Boebert was on with Stephanie Ruhle last night on MSNBC. She's absolutely desperate. There's one thing Lauren Boebert can do, which is get off that island and get away from Matt Gaetz as quickly as you can. The Gaetz gang is... Ryan Zinke was on with Caitlin Collins yesterday. Well, I don't have time. I want to tell you about Relief Factor. Asa Hutchinson's coming up. I don't know if he uses Relief Factor, but I do. I got a long car ride today, and that's great. Gives me a chance to listen to the book, Children of the Empire of the Summer Moon. Larry Arnn recommended to me. He's coming up in hour number 3. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I are going to listen to that, but we're also going to take our relieffactor.com. I already took mine. I'm coming back on Saturday, driving up there, coming back on Saturday night. A lot of driving over 2 days, but I'll be fine because relieffactor.com goes to work every day for me. Should go to work every day for you. Hold off those minor aches and pains that come from long commutes, 6-7 hour drive. Weather's a little bit iffy, but we'll be fine. We got water, we got food, we got relieffactor.com. It should be in your car. Don't get stuck with a Dr. Pepper and an apple like Senator Kaine did during the great ice storm of 2021 in Virginia. I'll be right back with Asa Hutchinson, who is running for president. We'll talk to him why and what he stands for next. Stay tuned, America. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Asa Hutchinson, former governor of Arkansas, former member of the House. Good morning, Governor. Good to have you on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hugh, it is great to be with you this morning. Hope you're well.
I am. I assume you're running for president. I don't know if you formally filed. Have you formally filed yet?
Oh, no, I have not. No final decisions made. Still a little bit early. Most important thing is the message that we get out of a common sense conservatism and new leadership for our future. So I'm going to be fighting that battle in the coming months, and we'll see what the final decision is.
So, Governor, when do you have to make a decision by to be actually competitive? I mean, you got to raise a lot of small dollar donors. The RNC is going to put people on the stage based on polling and number of donors, if my leaks out of the RNC are correct. Debate's supposed to start in July in Milwaukee. When will you have to make a decision whether or not you're going to go formally?
Well, I think you've got, the 3 or 4 months, should be in the springtime. That gives you time to be ready. So that's the outside marker to me is sometime in the spring. We're doing all the things that are necessary in terms of I'm going to be in Iowa. I'm going to be in the key states. I'm going to be talking about what I believe in the future for our country, from border security to energy policy. And we see where that goes and makes a decision based upon the level of support and the final decision as to whether I can make a difference in the direction of our country.
Now, Governor, the Hughes rules would be you've got to have won a statewide race before you get to be on the platform or be the former president. Let me start with a couple of substance. We do a lot of substance before we get to politics. What's your starting position on how Americans ought to feel about China right now?
Well, China is an adversary. China is a terrible relationship in terms of their aggressiveness, both with Taiwan, with Hong Kong, with the straits there in the international waters. It is we have to change our China-centric chain to move away from China. Whenever you look at our trade with China, it has been unfair. It hasn't been balanced. They don't follow the international rules, and we've got to be tougher in terms of China. There's probably more can be said there, but that's a pretty good starting point.
Let me give you a specific. If they start moving an invasion force across the Taiwan Strait, should the U.S. Navy sink those ships?
Well, whenever you look at the potential of an invasion in Taiwan, first of all, you've got to make sure that Taiwan is equipped. I think that I'm not going to make the call on that until I get the counsel of the military and we look at our plan. First of all, there should be a plan as to deal with that scenario. It has to be developed in advance. We have to know what the action points are, and we want to be able to stand with Taiwan.
Well, if you run and if you win, the president-elect will have to tell the Pentagon whether or not you're willing to go right up to the point of sinking Chinese ships. Now, it's okay not to have an answer, obviously, but before the November election, shouldn't our candidate make their Taiwan position known before the election, the primaries begin?
I think that's fair in a certain standpoint, but at the same time, you don't want to tell China exactly the game plan, and they need to understand that we're going to be with Taiwan, that we're going to stand with them just as strong as we're standing with Ukraine, if not stronger. And they need to understand that there's a line that can be crossed. Now, as to all the consequences of it, I don't think whether you're a candidate or, as president, let's don't tell the whole war plan to China. So there's some things that need to be unsaid, but the position basically needs to be understood that it's not acceptable for China to take that kind of aggressive action against Taiwan.
Have you been to Taiwan, Governor Hutchinson?
Oh, yes. I've been to Taiwan a couple of times, been to China a number of times, so I've traveled in that area. And, of course, Taiwan, just such a great ally of the United States, democratic nation. And we've had a two-China policy forever, that we have had some ambiguity in that relationship, and I think one thing that has to be done is to whether we need to clarify the ambiguity and whether, that is the right course for the future that we've had in the last couple decades.
Now, Governor, I don't know if you got around to it. A lot of Republican governors have banned TikTok from their state government agencies and employees. Did you do that? Do you wish you had if you didn't have time?
No, I did it. And first of all, I've actually will be governor until next week when.
I thought Sarah was already in. You're still governor. Okay.
Yeah, that's all right. It's close. But yes, is probably a month ago that I issued an order directive making sure that TikTok is banned from our state platforms. It's just an example of the risk is too great when China, as a communist nation, has so much control over their businesses. And so, yes, I did that.
So you can still appoint people. You're still governor.
Well, I can if there's a death or resignation, but as a practical matter.
Well, I mean, you probably could just appoint me commissioner of the Arkansas River and ambassador to Ohio right now if you'd like to. I got Tim Pawlenty to make me commissioner of hockey in Minnesota. So I'm just saying, Governor, I'll wait for the call this week. Let's get back to stuff. I asked every candidate a lot during the 2016 cycle about our nuclear triad because it's old. It's very old. What is most important in your view when it comes to funding the triad? Which one gets the most, the first?
Well, when you're looking at the triad, you're looking at our submarine capacity, our land-based, our air capabilities in defense. And, the principle is that we have to have all capabilities. It's sort of like energy policy. You need to make sure that we have multiple capabilities so that if one is not effective, then you have others that you can turn to. And so you want to make sure that is capable. Obviously, our submarine capacity is movable. It is more difficult to target, and so that obviously is very critical as well as the air. But historically, the triad has been important, but those are two that I think are critically important to strengthen.
So you would, if you have a limited amount of money, you would fund the Columbia class first, the B-21 second, and then get around to upgrading the missiles?
Listen, I'm going to appoint you Navy Secretary, it sounds like.
No, look, I just asked the questions that most of the military guys, I'm a civilian governor. I don't know anything about this stuff. But the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force argue about this all the time. Brings me to my next question, which is, do we need to actually, it's basically a third right now, and it has been forever. Do you think it's time to move money out of big Army and into Navy, Marine Corps, Air, and Space?
Well, I mean, I'm a Navy guy. My dad served in the Navy. My brother served in the Navy. I believe it is critically important. We have to build more ships. We have reduced the size of our Navy. That is not acceptable. And that's what gives us the strength globally. No other nation can match our capacity. Whenever you're looking at our Air Force, and whether it's the F-35 fighter jets that we hope to be training in Arkansas, or whether it is other capacities that we have in the air, those are the most significant early strength weapons that we have and fighting forces. Obviously, the Army, you can't diminish that. So I want to strengthen each of those, but you want to have a long-term military plan that gives us the most effective fighting force.
Yeah, I just think that this is going to be a big issue, as will be judges, where I go next. You've appointed judges for 8 years. If you run for president, will you do what Donald Trump did and put out a list of the people who you will take your first Supreme Court nominee from?
Well, that was a message. I mean, he had, 100 people on the list. And so
no, sure, it was like 40. It was a good long list, but it was 40 good, solid conservatives.
That's a possibility. It's the most important thing is that you convey what kind of judges that you want that actually understand the Constitution, strict constructionists, that are pro-life, that understand the importance of not legislating from the bench. Those are the things that are important to convey to the American people as to what kind of judges you want. As to whether we present a list, we'll wait and see, because I'm not a candidate yet, by the way. I am looking at this, and no final decision has been made.
Well, if you are, I'm going to come back to that, because I think it's vital that the Republicans take a page from that playbook. Governor, let me ask you about the debates. The RNC is going to meet later this month out here in California and decide the rules for those debates. And Ronna McDaniel told me they're going to probably start in Milwaukee, probably in July or August. I think that's too late, because we're missing opportunities to build audience and get small donors. I'm a Republican. What do you think?
Well, yeah, they ought to authorize debates that are earlier than that. Part of it will depend upon the number of candidates that are there. But July is late whenever you're looking at, Iowa coming up so quickly in January, February, New Hampshire quickly following that. And historically, you've had, the broadcast media willing to sponsor debates, and if the RNC prohibits that under certain conditions and tries to control that, that's challenging. Of course, we can have town hall meetings. There could be other ways in which you get your message out. But to me, July, we can live with that. I'm a candidate, but obviously earlier would be helpful, because you need to have a long ramp, particularly if you have a number of candidates there.
And I'm in Switzerland on whoever gets to be the nominee, but I don't want my friends in legacy media, and I've worked for all the networks. I know these people. They're fine people. They're all liberals. I mean, I really do think they're all liberals. I want Mary Catherine Hammond, Guy Benson. I want the folks at Fox like Brett. I want me. I want my colleagues from Salem who are into politics to be on that stage asking those questions. I do not want legacy media doing that. What do you think, Governor? It all depends upon the personality and their biases and their sense of fairness. I mean, there's some in, as you would call the legacy media, that are actually fair and give you a chance to answer the question. So it all depends upon which one. But now, who are you going to nominate? Obviously, I'm not looking for an exhaustive list, but give me an example of a legacy media person that you think is fair to Republicans.
I'm not sure what you mean. Brett Baer, you mentioned. I think
no, Brett's not legacy. Legacy is ABC, CBS, CNN, NBC, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, not Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times. The bigs.
I couldn't give you a name.
Okay.
We got our preferences, and particularly in a Republican primary context.
Yeah.
I think somebody who understands the Republican base, the conservative principles, that's who needs to be probing the question. Otherwise, and I've been in those circumstances, you got somebody beating a dead horse on an issue that nobody cares about, but they're controlling the dialogue, and that's a concern.
And I think there's, for example, a discussion to be had on abortion, but I don't want to start framing it the way legacy media does. Are you against all abortions for the life of the mother? Obviously, there's a life of the mother exception that all of you are going to support. The question is going to be, would you be in favor of a federal statute? And if so, what week would you put it at? And I'll just ask you that now. Are you in favor of any federal legislation on abortion?
Well, historically, the pro-life movement has said, let's reverse Roe versus Wade and return it to the states. And that has been my view on it for 40 years. And, and Arkansas has, in fact, yesterday, Arkansas was named for the third straight year as the most pro-life state in the nation. And that's because I've signed every pro-life bill that's come to my desk. And I don't want to have a looser standard. So a lot depends upon, how that is approached. But historically, for 40 years, I've said that ought to be returned to the states, and that's where it is right now.
Let me talk to you about then school choice, because I've only got 10 more minutes with you, so I want to go through a couple more of these. Doug Ducey, who you know is a governor, signed the most aggressive school choice law into law this year. Every single Arizona student can grab that, I think it's $6,500, and do with it what they will. What do you think of that model? What do you think of school choice?
Oh, I'm in favor of it. You look at my family. I've had we've homeschooled one son. We have used private school. We use Christian school, Catholic school. We've used public school, and those are choices parents make based upon what is the best for the children. And so that's a model that I think is important. I applaud Governor Ducey. I love what he's done, and I think, you know, we had a start in school choice here in Arkansas under my leadership. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I believe, is going to pursue, without any doubt, that will be part of her agenda for the future. So we're moving that direction, and I applaud what Governor Ducey has done. I hope we get to talk about President Biden and border security.
That's where I'm going next. I want to know if you want to build the wall. Now, the border is, for context, the border is 2,000 miles long. 1,000 miles of it is impassable. It's really the 1,000 miles that need the wall. What do you think about if not a wall, then a double layer of fence with a road between it that's high and wide?
Well, you expressed it just right. I mean, some is impassable. I've been there. You've got some geographic limitations, but you got some other issues. But we absolutely need to continue to build the wall in those areas that it makes sense. We need to strengthen that both through technology, but also through a physical structure. It's proven successful in some areas. We need to be able to continue that. You know, whenever Biden comes out with his proposal yesterday, it's very disappointing that he did not address the cartel issue that I've been talking about for 2 months. That we're not going to be successful on the border until we engage Mexico in partnership to go after the cartel. That is absolutely critical. Secondly, is much too limited. They focused on 4 countries yesterday in Biden's policies versus the broad breadth of the issues that we're facing along the border. I'm glad he's going to both Mexico and meeting with them and going to El Paso, but it just signifies that this is a bipartisan, harm on our country that in a bipartisan way people are recognizing. So
it's a crisis. Governor Youngkin in my state, I'm a Virginian, so I know what Youngkin's up to. They're now started one pill can kill. And I think that's a great line for kids to understand because one pill can kill you now because of the fentanyl deal. I am curious, though, and I'm not going to frame it like legacy media. They would bring up the dreamers. I'm just going to ask you what you would do with the 20 million people who are in the country without permission.
Well, and the answer is that we should not address comprehensive immigration reform, as you're speaking of, and addressing the status of those that are in the country until we secure the border and give the American public confidence that we're taking the right steps there. So we don't need to have a comprehensive immigration bill that goes to Congress. It needs to be a border security bill that goes to Congress that gives a replacement for Title 42, that gives more of our resources, that reforms our asylum program, and that addresses the cartel. We have to have a border security bill before we ever touch anything else.
What do you think about, I got time for 2 more substantive, and I do substantive. Keep coming back, Governor, because I love talking issues. What about aid to Ukraine? And so you know, my audience supports it. I support it. Send them whatever they need to get the Russians out of their country and degrade the Russian military capability. What's Asa Hutchinson think?
Absolutely. I've been a consistent supporter of Ukraine. They're fighting for their freedom, their sovereignty, but it also has an impact throughout Europe, and it does degrade Russia. Absolutely. It's essential that Ukraine win, and we have to have a winning strategy, not just a defensive strategy there through Ukraine. And we make many of the armaments, the HIMARS that's been so successful there are made in Camden, Arkansas. So very proud of that contribution.
Now, Governor DeSantis gave an inaugural, and if you run, you'll be on the debate stage probably with him. He said, Florida is where woke goes to die. Cotton jokes with me that woke doesn't even try to go to Arkansas. I am curious what you think about public schools today in the indoctrination and the CRT. Is it a real problem, or is that a figment of the right's imagination?
Well, I think it's a problem in terms of the indoctrination that comes from certain public schools environments. And that's why we want to empower parents That's why we want to make sure that they have a voice and there's transparency in that environment. I don't believe in Arkansas it is the extensive problem that it is in other states, because we've got conservative people on the school boards. We've got conservative parents that are in there making sure that what's being taught in the public schools is not undermining the values that they learn at home. That's why parents have to be engaged in it, but it's also why school choice is important. And so let's fight that battle. I believe in fighting the cultural battles. I've been doing that for 40 years. That's why we're the most pro-life state. But let's make sure we fight it consistent with conservative principles, which is utilizing parents. It's not always government power. It is local control. It is parents being engaged in our education system and giving them the tools that they need.
Last question, and keep coming back, Governor. CDC, their credibility is in a shambles. Dr. Fauci is retired. Ron DeSantis is standing up a grand jury to look into what was true and not true. What do you think about what CDC did? What do you think about the vaccine? Whether or not, did you get it? Did you get the boosters? Let's start there. Did you get the vaccine?
Me personally?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I took the vaccine and I advocated for it. I think it's a good therapeutic tool, but we also made sure that government's not mandating it. And I think it was an error for it to be required in the military with the state of that vaccine and the fact that it had not gained public acceptance yet.
And I got the boosters. I got every booster. Did you get every booster?
I got every, and I believe in it, and so it's helped. That's why we've advocated, been very clear about that. But you asked me about CDC, and it's a bureaucracy that failed us, and the confusion, and part of it came with the confusion with the White House. But yeah, it was a bureaucracy that failed us during that time. Hopefully, they can get reorganized. There's some good people that serve there. I've got two of my former secretaries of health. They're at CDC now, and I think they're trying to do a good job. But they're critical for us, absolutely, the CDC. And public health is a real challenge for us in the future. We could have another outbreak of a virus, and we're looking for a vaccine. So let's be prepared. CDC has a role to play, but boy, they were not the tool that we needed at the beginning of the pandemic.
Amen to that. Governor, what's your website where people can find out about you now? And by the way, if you want to send me HughHewitt.com, my ambassadorship to Ohio, the Arkansas ambassadorship to the Buckeye State, we teach you something about football down there. But where do people find out more about Asa Hutchinson?
I think we need to make you an Arkansas traveler. Maybe that's the appointment that you need. But thank you for asking, and my education effort is through America Strong and Free. So if you go to americastrongandfree.com, you'll be able to follow us. And Hugh, I appreciate it. Boy, you need to be on that debate stage, either as a candidate or as a moderator.
Oh, not ever going to run for anything, but I do love to ask questions, Governor, and I like that you answered them. Thank you. America, what is the website, Governor? America Free and Strong?
America Strong and Free.
AmericaStrongandFree.com. Governor Asa Hutchinson, congratulations on 2 great terms running the Razorback State. I'll be back with Dr. Larry Arnn after this. Hillsdale Dialogue is next, America. Stay tuned.
This hour of Hugh Hewitt starts right now on Salem News Channel.
Good morning, America. I've got some laryngitis, but I'm going to talk with Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale College, not about the history of the English-speaking people, but about the meltdown in Congress. What does Dr. Arnn think about what is going on Capitol Hill? That's coming up on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You won't want to miss a minute. This hour of Hugh Hewitt is on Salem News Channel.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. That music means we are in the last radio hour of the week. The Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arnn, appearing by the first time with me via Skype. Dr. Arnn was dragged kicking and screaming into the reality of Skype and the visual world, and he's not very happy with me, I think. You're not happy at all, are you, Dr. Arnn?
I need a pay raise.
Yeah, maybe someone out there will send some checks to hillsdale.edu because they like the way that you look. You look very good, by the way. You're even wearing a tie.
Yeah, I got up and got dressed. It's so stupid. Hey, I knew Rush Limbaugh really well, and the point is, he did his best work in his jammies, and I do too.
I will. We will see. Let's give it a whirl. Let's start with the first thing I want to tell everyone. We are taping this on Wednesday. It is airing on Friday, which is particularly unfortunate because we are in the middle of the House Republican meltdown. But since Dr. Arnn is known and respected by every one of the 222 members of the House, and I believe that's true, he's a good person to consult. I'm angry with the 20, very angry with the 20. Because you only get one chance to make a first impression. And the one thing they accomplished yesterday, they stepped on the inaugural address of Ron DeSantis, which otherwise would have made up my entire show on Wednesday. But we spent it talking about the 20. What did you make of the Wednesday meltdown, Dr. Arnn?
Well, first of all, your opinion is typical of you. You think that the media is the center of the universe.
Yes.
Whereas these rules that they're fighting on, these 20 have a point. I'm not saying that I think I don't know what's going on. Nobody does. They don't know. McCarthy doesn't know. But what are they asking for? They're asking that it be guaranteed to them that bills be for a single subject. In other words, the people can tell where they stand. They should vote for one thing at a time. This monstrosity that just passed, $1.7 trillion. Tom Cotton voted for that. I haven't talked to him, but I read his statement and already knew why he did it. There's a bunch of defense stuff in there.
Yes.
And we need that stuff. And it's a judgment, right? Whether you pay the cost, which is probably $1 for $2 or $1 for every dollar you get for defense. That's the old trade that they had to make in the Reagan years. Reagan was going to build up the defense budget, but he couldn't get the votes in the Congress to do it from the Democratic Party unless he expanded everything. And so they're trying to break that down. And that's fundamental representative government. And they got some concessions, but they don't believe the concessions because, I've discovered in recent years that there are liars in Washington, D.C.
Now, Dr. Arnn, I was told by people who are reliable, not by Leader McCarthy, who you and I know very well, well. You've probably known him longer than I have because you were up at the Claremont Institute when he was out in the California. I think he was probably working for the member from Bakersfield when you first met Kevin McCarthy. So you know him very well. Kevin's not a liar. And I understand that he represented to the conference on Sunday. You're going to have 72 hours with every bill, not 3 days, 72 hours, single subject rule, motion to vacate for 5, and a couple other things. In other words, he gave them everything that they wanted, so much so that my kind of Republican, Midwestern Republicans like David Joyce, were mad. But they agreed just to get to 218. But then the goalposts move. If that's true, what do you think about that?
Well, if that's true, that's bad. They shouldn't have done that. And the key things, they wrote McCarthy a letter that one can read, and his answer to it that one can read. And both of those documents are reasonable. They're asking for some things that would be very good for the American people and the resurrection of the Constitution to get back. Because here's what we've lost, right? The government is opaque now. Just imagine a world, which world we lived in until about 1960, where the big question before the House was abortion or defense spending. You got to remember that what the federal government is actually properly about is 60% national defense. And so they're going to have a bill. And what are they going to do? Are they going to have the atomic bomb? Are they going to have ballistic missile defense or not? And you can know if you're a congressperson voted for or against that. And then see that representative government doesn't just mean that there's an election every 2 years. It's also that you can effectively watch what they do and then talk about it a lot. I mean, gosh, we're suppressing speech in America today. So they're trying, and another thing is most of the laws are not made in the Congress anymore. And those guys, every decent congressman is ambitious to do something about that. We should have the bureaucracy under control. The FBI is corresponding with Twitter about what ought to get published.
That's very bad.
That's bad. And that means we have a government out of control. And this is an argument about how to get it under control. And you can say, we need to have regular order and just get on with it, right? But what does get on with it mean? Is it $4 or $5 trillion in the last 3 years added to the national debt?
Well, let me ask you, I don't know Jim Jordan well, but I know him well enough. I've been on a stage with him 4 or 5 times, and I want him to have the gavel of the Judiciary Committee, and I want him, if necessary, to subpoena the 80 different FBI agents who were involved in the Twitter files, one by one. That will take a lot of time. It will take a lot of effort, and time is a wasting. And you run an organization that is bigger than the House of Representatives. How many people work for Hillsdale?
Close to 800.
All right, so 800 people as opposed to 222. You've got to get them organized and working, and you're the ultimate authority, and you do that. I just do not know how it is better not to have a speaker than it is to have one that you don't like on the margins, particularly when I know Kevin McCarthy, and you know him as well as I do, better. He's a good man.
Well, I very much hope that they make this deal this morning. Right, but here's another thing, the deal that's on the table, as far as I know, and remember it's changing by the minute, I would vote for that. But here's another thing that they were insisting on. The Constitution of the United States went into operation in what, 1790? 1789? Yeah, 1789. For all that time, any member could vote could move to vacate the chair, and that means the speaker's job was in peril every day. And Nancy Pelosi changed that, and the way the government works today is not the way it used to work. You need to run for Congress. You need money. You need support from big groups, right? And you need to get on the right committees so that they will pay attention to you. And the speaker has a lot of control over that. And that should be decentralized. And, I'm for McCarthy big time. And Jim Jordan is a great man, and I do know him. And he's also showing real statesmanship here because
yes, he is.
These are his people who are holding all this up, and he's the one who makes the motion for McCarthy for Speaker every time, and he does it well. And that means that he is confident that some good things can be done if we get this team in there, and he's going to be allowed to do them. So that's another reason why I very much hope that they settle this morning. On the other hand, I'm not going to join the baying hounds who call these guys awful. The things that they're talking about are fundamentally important.
When we come back from break, I'm going to bay a little bit because I'm one of the baying hounds. And I base that baying on a briefing I received from 2 different members about the impossibility of negotiating with someone who changes their ask all the time. And the motion to vacate the chair, they asked for 5, they got 5, and the Republicans like David Joyce, the Midwesterners, did not want that. And I'm afraid bad things will come. I'm afraid the party might break. And we're going to talk about what Joseph Chamberlain did to his party, which is about, I think, to happen to the Republicans in the House if we are not careful. Dr. Arnn knows that story better than anyone. We're also going to talk about Chinese Gordon when we come back. There's a lot to tie in here because we're on the precipice of a very bad moment for the Republican Party. Stay by. I'll be back with Dr. Arnn. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. Sometimes even a few members in a legislative body can make a big difference. I'm reading right now, because of Dr. Arnn and I will be moving on in about 4 weeks, something called The River War. And Chinese Charles Gordon was stuck in Khartoum, and he was going to die unknown and unremarked upon until a fellow named Lord Randolph Churchill, first among everyone in the House, stood up and began to demand that aid be dispatched to Gordon. And eventually it was dispatched, but it was dispatched too late. But the whole country was remade because of one individual. I'm reading that because of you, Dr. Arnn, and I'm reading it simultaneous with this meltdown. I don't think these guys are Sir Randolph Churchill. I don't think that. I think they are more like Gladstone at this point, ignoring the obvious need of the country.
The only one of them that I know personally is Chip Roy.
Oh, very good man.
Yeah. He's a very good man. Right. And so it's like a lot of people are livid with Tom Cotton for the vote he cast in the Senate. I am not. And I haven't even talked to him about it. I know why he did it. He's presented with a bunch of bad choices. And these guys are trying to use what authority they have. And it all comes, by the way, from the fact that there's a tiny minority. Right. And so a tiny group of a tiny group of people can hold the whole show up. Well, I hope they come to a resolution, and around the points that seem to have been agreed so far, that's enough, I think, to go forward. And I like it that some of them are willing to kick, because goodness gracious, are we getting close to Niagara Falls here and about to go over? That's another.
Well, we're a little bit like Gordon in Khartoum right now. We are getting very close to being outmatched by the Chinese. We are on the verge of $30 trillion in debt and a stagflation that's going to make the 1970s, when you and I were young men, look like a piker's dream. But I don't know that we can advance the ball until we get a hold of the committees. And you can't get a hold of the committees till you get a speaker.
Well, they're not going, by the way, they're not going to advance the ball very much. What they're going to do is obstruct and point out things.
Yes.
And that's all they can do. And you know, we need to have a good election in America. We need a big change. And there's some people on the scene who might be running for president who will probably be very good at that. But you need the government to be united. And right now we've just got one bit out of 3 popularly elected bits. The Republicans just have one bit. And they're just going to have to use that to prevent the worst things happening and make a case. That, by the way, is rather what happened in the last 2 years of the Carter administration. There were a lot of hearings, and there were some good bills passed, actually, because people could see we were getting in trouble about the Soviet Union. And people, and so they, you know, the Joint Economic Committee under Jack Kemp proposed the tax cuts that were passed early in the Reagan years. It's things like that that they can hope to do. They need to do them right, and they need clarity. Another thing is, it's so hard to figure out what all this means right now. There's no, like you're talking about Joseph Chamberlain. Well, he split the liberals in partnership with the conservative Lord Randolph Churchill, Churchill's daddy, over a clear bill, Irish Home Rule. That's what that bill was about. We're going to let the Irish govern themselves. And we've already repealed all the disabilities against Catholics, which I very much favor, except in the case of you. And so the point was, there was a big public fight, and it was about something that everybody could understand. And it's a curious thing about that thing, because Lord Randolph Churchill and Joseph Chamberlain destroyed the Liberal Party, and Joseph Chamberlain moved over to the Conservatives and brought a lot of things that he was for as a liberal with him. But how much later? 30 years later, Winston Churchill, the son, is the man who negotiated the Irish Home Rule Treaty.
And when we come back, this all plays together. It's almost providential because next 2 weeks, we're going to finish up the history of the English-speaking people. We're going to be talking about Chamberlain and Gladstone. And when parties split, it's because fundamental things are afoot, which Dr. Arnn often says on this show is the period of time in which we are in. I just expected the Democrats to split, not the Republicans. We'll talk about it after the break. Stay tuned. Okay, stay right there. Dr. Arnn will be right back. In the meantime, ReliefFactor.com, even in the middle of the Hillsdale Dialogue, even as we talk about Gladstone and Disraeli, even as we talk about the Irish question, even as we talk about the history of the English-speaking people, you need to listen to the Hillsdale Dialogue, but you've got to take your ReliefFactor.com. And this is when I always remind you every hour, different people listen to different hours of the show, and I always remind everyone who's listening to the show, don't forget, if you want to feel better by the end of tomorrow, take in Relief Factor today. $19.95 gets you started. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, omega. The only natural supplement I take a vitamin. I take what my doctor tells me to take, and I take my ReliefFactor.com. I do it every single day. I'm going to send some to Larry Arnn. Maybe he'll put it on, now that he's videoing with us, maybe he'll put it in the visual. Actually, I don't want him to do that. So we're coming right back. More with Dr. Larry Arnn. Hillsdale.edu for all things Hillsdale. ReliefFactor.com for ReliefFactor.com. And if you want to listen to every Hillsdale podcast, all the dialogues, go to Hugh for Hillsdale.com or simply Google Hugh Hewitt and iTunes and Hillsdale, or simply just go Google Hillsdale Dialogue. It's hard for the Steelers fans to spell it, but that'll work. I'll be right back with the Hillsdale Dialogue continuing along. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Sitting there, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, is Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu, and I've dragged him into the world of video. Welcome back, America. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Sitting there, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, is Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu. And I've dragged him into the world of video as well as the world of audio because people like to hear him talk and they like to see him talk. And it's working pretty well, even though he needs to look up more, like me. You got to look up more, doctor. That's it. That's what. I love this. You're like Churchill being asked to rebuild Parliament. I don't want to do it. I want it exactly the same way. Dr. Arnn, let's go back to the splitting of the party. Joseph Chamberlain walked out on Irish Home Rule, and he didn't cross the aisle. He just walked out. These 20 Republicans, they can't walk over to the other side. They're against everything on the other side. There isn't a defining issue about which they are walking out, is there?
Well, yeah, sure. The difficulty for them is that these things they're protesting about they're not obvious, because nothing in the government is obvious anymore. It's been organized so that it's not obvious. But what they're protesting about is the power of the administrative state to dominate the Congress. These 2,000-page bills full of God knows what and who. Nobody reads them. You know, one of the things they demanded was that they should get 72 hours. Now, is that 3 days to read a 2,000-page bill and digest it and talk about it? Right? That's, Hillsdale College is very tough, but we do 800 pages in 15 weeks. Now, they do it times 4, but you see, in other words, it is not a deliberative body anymore, and they want to make it into one. Kevin McCarthy, I believe, by the way, wants to make it into one too, and that's why I hope that they find a peace by the time this is aired.
I think you're an optimist, Doctor. I was briefed on the single subject rule, which I think is brilliant. That you cannot bring forward an amendment that is not germane. You can't log rule anymore under the rules package demanded by and acceded to by the moderates who like log rolling, the appropriators. Our friend on the Appropriations Committee, Ken Calvert, he's not going to like that. He's going to want to be able to log roll, but they gave in. They gave that up. And I'm sitting here thinking we're going to lose 8 Republicans pretty soon who are going to cross the aisle to the Democrats. And if they do, they're going to do it over the fact that they do not want to be held up twice. Do you worry that that is a real risk? Because by Friday morning, we might have that. I saw Fred Upton, who you know and I know. Fred Upton today, on Wednesday morning when we taped this, said, it might not be a bad thing to be the Speaker of the House. He's counting on 10 of his buddies. You don't have to be a member of the House to be the Speaker of the House. Counting on maybe 10 of his buddies hooking up with Hakeem Jeffries and voting in Fred Upton as Speaker. And he's a good man. I go to church with him, right? I like Fred Upton. But I can see where that is a risk. I don't think Gladstone saw Chamberlain as a risk until it was too late. Do you think we're looking past the risk?
Well, yeah, look, there's nothing but risk right now. But then you ask yourself the question, what is the risk? The risk is that the government of the United States controls more than half the economy, and that's not enough. They're also borrowing against the future, and they legislate through a permanent bureaucracy that nobody controls, right? So if Fred Upton or anybody crosses the aisle to join the people who are in favor of all that, then that's a fundamental decision. He's made the decision. And that's, and I don't think he will, surely not, right? But because if fundamental things are afoot, you need a division about those things, right? And we're getting closer to that. And it could be that it's all just chaos, but heck, it's chaos right now.
Well, it would be chaos right up until the debt limit, at which point the United States sovereign debt is defaulted on if the House hasn't organized. I don't think you want that. I don't want that. But I would love to message on fundamental things. I would love to message on school choice. I would love to message on the border. I would love particularly to have Mike Gallagher running the select committee on China every day and holding hearings everywhere across the country, alerting them to why TikTok needs to be banned at Hillsdale College and everywhere else. But we can't message a doggone thing. And I do believe there comes a moment where the people who've been taken hostage break out. And just break out because they've had it. They just, it's 200 to 20. And that's okay. If this is still 200 to 20 on Friday morning when this airs, we're in a world of hurt as a Republican Party. Does that alarm you, Dr. Arnn?
Well, sure. But, yeah, of course it does. But, you know, the insanity, you know, is doing the same thing over and over and expecting to get different results. But for this rebellion, the rules would have been the same as they've been the last 6 years, right? And so they've won something. Now, I hope and think that I don't know what I think. I'm not there, but I hope that they will make a deal now. I think the terms are good, and the ones I read in the paper.
That's you and I are in the same position of not knowing what the nitty gritty is. But I am afraid by what I understand from people like Gallagher, who they're not part of this. They are national security people. They stand apart. You mentioned Reagan in 1980. When Jerry Ford ran in 1976, I supported him against the Reagan revolution in the primary. I've always been a Jerry Ford kind of Republican. I'll bet you were with Ronald Reagan, weren't you?
Of course.
Of course. And so you have on your screen the establishment party, that's me, and the Reaganite, that's Dr. Arnn. But eventually they got together and did great things. But it took a period in the wilderness, and I don't want to go there again, Larry. I just think the 20 are asking a lot of really good Republicans like Gallagher and Waltz, and I could just name them, and you know them better than I do. They're asking them to give up their seniority, their ideas, their select committees, their gavels. At what point does a party break rather than do that?
Well, Mike Gallagher is a very smart man, and I'm confident that he does not think that foreign policy is prior to domestic policy. Foreign policy is for the sake of domestic policy. Now, it can be more urgent, which is why I don't criticize Tom Cotton for voting for that monstrosity, right? But this is, you know, I mean, if the cost of all this is that we take a week and get a better system so that Congress is more accountable and more powerful against the bureaucracy, that'll be a week really well spent.
Well, that is a tantalizing prospect, but I'm afraid, let me put it to you my best way. I think we're in 1941, and I think that admirals are testifying to Congress that the Japanese are building a very big fleet, and they're not going to let it. January of 41, new Congress arrives, and they're hearing testimony from my wife's grandfather, and FDR, it's actually 1940. FDR fires him because he went up to the Hill, and he was admiral at that time, and he testified the Japanese are going to go to war with us. And FDR didn't like that, so he fired him. I think we're at that point with the Chinese, and we've got to get focused, Dr. Arnn. We are on the cusp of a terrible time in the world, one of eclipse. And we've got some of those 20 are not in it for Chip Roy's reason. Chip Roy's a good man, and I've heard him speak, and I've been in a room with him at dinner, and I've never interviewed him on the air, but he's got high ideals. A lot of these 20 do not.
Well, I don't know them. I mean, I don't, you know, first of all, remember, you're making statements about the internal operations of other people's minds. And what you really only know is what they say.
Right.
The reason I know what's going on in your mind is that I've known you for 400 years. And
yes,
you were wrong right at the beginning. No, and so that's a hard thing to say, right? Some of this stuff is impractical, and if they can't make this deal, but see, it's more than I know to know that that they have changed the goalpost. If they have, that's not good. But, you know, because just think what it's like. This is herding cats. That's what this is like. And, you know, everybody's texting and everybody's calling and the staffs are running all over the place and rumor reigns, you know. And then every day they get together for a meeting, but they work 20 hours that day when they're not all together. So it's a mess, right? And so one thing that you want, and you're right to want, is there need to be some way to bring order out of all of this. And that's actually McCarthy's job.
On Wednesday, I had Juan Ciscomani on. And remember that name, if you haven't met Juan yet, he was representing Tucson, the Arizona 6th District. He was born in Mexico, came into the country and became a naturalized American. He has 6 children. And he was brought to my attention by Governor Ducey. And I just felt, and by Kevin McCarthy, who got him elected. And Juan is in Washington with his 6 children and his wife, Laura, in the gallery. He's not getting paid and he doesn't have health insurance because they can't get sworn in until there is a speaker. And I thought that and he's very pro Kevin McCarthy, but he also likes Eli Crane, who's a Navy SEAL, who also is a freshman that Kevin McCarthy got elected, who's with the 20. And this is a dilemma. And you and I on this screen kind of represent the dilemma. I want people to get on with the job, and you're saying, whoa there, Hewitt, there might be something more important than the job ahead of us. Am I right in summarizing it that way?
We have to restore the proper operation of the American Constitution in order to be effective at the job over time. And what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it is the great majority of the laws are not made in the Congress anymore. And the poor congressmen, when they vote, it's a very elaborate system of presenting them impossible choices. You see, because we stick all this stuff together. And it means that if you want to save the life of a child, you have to shoot your grandmother. That's how it works, right?
Stand by. We're going to come right back to this subject. Don't go anywhere. The Hillsdale Dialogue, which was taped on Wednesday, concludes right after this for Friday. I'll be right back. Welcome back, America. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. This is the Hillsdale Dialogue. That on your screen, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, is the first live picture of Dr. Larry Arnn. It's like Neil Armstrong setting out on the moon. One small step for a man, one large leap for Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu, including this gentleman on the right side of your screen, Dr. Larry Arnn, who is the president of that institution. And by Friday, I hope this is all irrelevant, but I fear that it isn't. Assume for a moment, Dr. Arnn, that we are in deadlock on Friday. What ought to happen over the weekend other than calling you up and asking you to mediate? What ought to, because Donald Trump announced on Wednesday morning everyone should get behind Kevin, and if they haven't, then everybody's hands have been played and the game's over and we're stuck. What happens then?
Well, the game can't be over, right? Because those people, those 218 or 22 or something, they've been elected, and they're not going to change overnight. And they're not going to, I mean, I don't think a bunch of them are going to go join the other party. That'd be crazy. But some of them may, I don't know. But in other words, these questions will all remain after this is settled. What I hope for is that the deal that one reads about in the paper, the one that Kevin McCarthy agreed to, I think it was on Sunday last.
Yes.
I hope they make that deal. And I hope everybody votes for it. And I hope then that they proceed in a better way to the House needs to be less manageable, by the way. I mean, look at the House of Representatives. It's very funny. In the eyes of the founders, the Senate was supposed to be the courageous body. The Senate is more the cowardly body now. And the reason is the way the country has evolved and also been ill-governed and bad laws is that a higher percentage of the Senate has contested seats than the House. House seats, there are very few, right, that are, what is there, 435 of them and 70 or 80 of them?
Oh, I don't think that many. I bet you 30.
Yeah, and so most of them are holding safe seats, right? And that means they can be braver. And you can see how that works on the left, right? They just prepared to do just about any crazy thing. And on the right, not as much, but some of that. And so somehow you need all of this mess that we're in, which just gets worse all the time, by the way.
It does. Let me give you an example. On Monday of this week, the Environmental Protection Agency announced that they are repealing the Trump rules about the waters of the United States. And they're going to restore the Obama-era rules on the waters of the United States, which are tyrannical, Fifth Amendment breaking, property seizing attempts by a federal administrative state to seize people's property. And if the House was organized, I'd have the EPA administrator up there tomorrow in front of the House Public Works and Environmental Protection Agency and the appropriator, and I would shut them down because they're stealing people's property. But we can't get...
That's a good thing they're fighting for. They want to get back the old practice that they can delete the salary of a particular official in the executive branch. And they are unable to do that right now since Nancy Pelosi made some changes. Well, that's a good idea, but that's right. In other words, they're trying to get, the whole, and I'm not saying that it's confined to these 4 or 5 people, most of whom I don't know. I'm just saying that the issues that they're debating are very important. And we need elected people to control the government. Because although they're terrible, it's also true that we elect them and we can get rid of them. Whereas the all-powerful bureaucracy, we can't do anything about that, except over a very long time. And, because I believe in being optimistic. I studied Winston Churchill, right? It's a shame to go around thinking you're beaten before you actually are. Indeed, even after you actually are. And I think that there's promise everywhere you look. Jim Jordan is a heck of a guy, right? And he's recommending McCarthy, and he's going to have a lot of authority in this Congress, right? And he'll do things with it. And
do you remember the movie Patton, Dr. Arnn?
Oh yeah, of course.
Remember when Patton was stuck in England giving speeches to little old ladies groups to raise war bonds, and he wanted to be cut loose? That is Jim Jordan. Cut him loose. Let him get into the field.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of fight in him, and he's not crazy. And one of the signs that he's not crazy is that he's a leader in the Freedom Caucus. He's one of the founders of it. And he's in there pitching for McCarthy right now.
For McCarthy.
And that's...
Gosh, I hope we're out of time this week. Next week we're back talking about Churchill. I hope by the time this airs that Jim Jordan is in the field down at the border holding a hearing. But I fear not. I fear not. Dr. Larry Arnn, Hillsdale.edu. We'll be back talking about Winston Churchill and the history of the English-speaking people next week, but we had to pause to bring you up to speed with what's going on because we are always aware of the present, even as we talk about the past. On the Hillsdale Dialogues, all the Hillsdale Dialogues are found at hughforhillsdale.com or at iTunes under Hillsdale Dialogue or at hillsdale.edu. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Generalissimo. Touch on Monday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.